I still haven't unlocked. Oh no, now we have Yaza. Okay, okay, cool, cool. I might do him next. So, Buran, 1 Year War. I've already initiated it. So there are 3 Titans pilots that have 1 Year War routes in this game. We got Lila, who I've already done. There's Buran, and there's Yazan. Now, one of theirs is different from the other, and one of theirs, I think, triggers the special route for Jared. It's basically like a Lala Lives route. It wasn't Lila, so I vaguely remember that it might be Yazan, who I haven't done yet. Trained for combat using a captured mobile suit. So much like the Germans in World War II, or no, World War One, they were blockaded. They did not have access to certain minerals necessary for the alloys, because let's not forget, steel is not a elemental metal, it's an alloy. They did not have the minerals necessary for the alloys to make tanks, so they had like 30 or so domestically produced tanks. And most of what they were using was captured British tanks, because a tank would break down in no man's land or whatever, and they had specialized teams to run out, salvage it, get it across the line so they could perform more extensive repairs. And similarly, while the Federation was figuring out mobile suits, the first mobile suits used by the Federation were captured Xeon machines. I mean, there was a whole thing in Gundam Igloo where I think it was the pilot of the Campfire, that semi-transforming tank mobile suit, like Xeon's gun tank. No, wait, because... Oh, god, no, because the Campfire was the one from War in the Pocket, I think. God, I can't remember the name of the tank one. Dolfer? Dolfer? It was some Germanic thing, okay? I don't know exactly, but there was a Xeon gun tank effectively, and its main opponent in its short was Xeon mobile suits that had been captured by the Federation.
Space aliens should go back where you came from. All right, let's get out of here.
And we're getting huge unit multipliers, because 1 Year War everyman machines. Where's the distinction between space and ground combat here? The Zaku operates in both. Of course, when they expanded the universe, there were specialized versions that were intended to operate in one or the other. Like, what was it, the Zaku F2 that was reconfigurable or something?
You fell for it. That all you got? This is ugly.
Here's my question. I understand that the game probably didn't have the development to do a special thing where we're maybe hitting these mobile suits with paintballs or something. But, I mean, mobile suits would be really precious to the Federation right now, because it doesn't really have mobile suits of its own. And here they have me training with a mobile suit by destroying a bunch of captured mobile suits that could be put to better work actually fighting on behalf of the Federation. I think this is one of those things where you have to apply a bit of imagination that we're probably not actually destroying these machines, and it's probably all just set up as an exercise, because that would be hilariously wasteful. Unless the Federation was just rolling in captured Xeon mobile suits, which would raise entirely new questions. How did they capture so many so efficiently? It just doesn't make sense.
All right, let's get out of here.
That's the prototype mobile suit, the Ground Combat Gym.
All right, launch. Don't fall behind.
I'll reiterate, because I probably covered it in Lila's route the last time I used the Ground Combat Gundam in the Ground Combat Gym, but the Ground Combat Gundam, as I understand it, was basically built from spare parts that were originally intended for an earlier design of the Gundam, and maybe some spare parts that were intended for the Gundam itself. And then the Ground Combat Gym basically just hybridized those bits with parts of the then-developing mass-production Gym to get even more suits out, because the Federation was just desperate for mobile suits. I really like the designs of the ground combat units, though, because the 8th Mobile Suit Team in Miller's report was leaning more into hard realism compared to the rest of the Gundam series. You had everyman pilots. There were no new-type aces. And they were using machines that were, you know, held together with duct tape and paper clips in places. There was also this thing that goes a little overlooked of the fact that the machines were also intended for self-deployment. The Gundam ground type has a backpack which can mount an equipment container intended specifically for carrying its gear, because it was going to be marching into battle, since it didn't have a fancy, special-built mobile suit launching spaceship, you know, like the white base that the Gundam had. So naturally, how's it going to get its rocket launcher into battle? How's it going to get its cannon into battle, or its missiles? You give it a backpack, and put them on the backpack. Because sure, later models incorporated storage for the weapons. There's storage for the beam rifle and the Gundam's shield. There's storage on the back skirt for the missile launcher. But the practical notion of these weapons are being stored exposed out in the open, and that being a bad thing, makes sense. Oh, that's tricky. The more canonical one would be the machine gun, because when you look at a lot of the mobile suits in things like War in the Pocket and so forth, they were using 90mm and 100mm machine guns instead of beam rifles, because beam rifles were an advanced technology and the machine guns were cheaper to produce. This will also prevent me from overshooting and potentially hitting White Base, because the point here is to protect White Base, after all.
Mobile suit team, launch!
And the 8th Mobile Suit Team had the perfect excuse for why its mobile suits were depicted as being a bit slower and clunkier, because a lot of them were ground-specific variants that were created with the notion that, well, all of these extra thrusters, these verniers, and everything else aren't going to work under the effect of Earth's gravity well. And since we can't maneuver as much, we need more armor, which is going to make us a bit slower and a bit heavier. And it was able to bring a more realistic depiction of such massive machines of war, given the scale of mobile suits, without messing with the canon as it was established. Which is exceptionally smart. Now, the story might have been a bit sappy in places, particularly given the fact that the central crux is the fact that it involves a love between a Federation pilot and a Zeon heiress. I mean, sure, Gundam has always involved a kind of anti-war message, particularly in the Universal Century. I like that they got a happy ending, and I also like that they had to pay for that happy ending, because when we see them... Because they're presumed dead. Because if either faction knew that they were still alive, they'd be, like, branded traitors and so forth. So they were presumed dead. But when we see them, you know, alive in the end, they have been maimed by the event in which they were presumed dead, and it kind of highlights the fact that, I mean, this is a happy ending because they're together and they're alive, but the war cost them dearly, as it should. So they managed to have a sort of uplifting moment without having it feel cheap. Which, again, is just smart writing, honestly. There's a lot of reasons I like the 8th Mobile Suit Team. The designs are good, the writing's good. And it's another reason why I like... Well, okay, Gundam Thunderbolt's writing is not as... I mean, I like the take they took for the Gundam universe, where our Fetty pilot, our main Fetty pilot, is the Blood Knight, which is a change because usually you expect that from the enemy faction, from Zeon. But Daryl Lorenz is, I mean, he doesn't even want to be in the war, and he's kind of this tragic figure who symbolically kind of sold his soul because he well, he didn't volunteer, he was ordered, but he understood that, okay, remove my, like, one remaining limb so that I can operate this ridiculous super mobile suit. And he ultimately realizes that, for him, it was to avenge his friends and defeat the Thunderbolt Gundam. Which isn't even technically called that in universe, just to defeat the Gundam. But his success in that would pave the gateway that all Zeon would need to allow for, you know, pilots with no skill to be capable of flying like aces is cut off all of their limbs, cut off their arms and legs, and then they can fly like aces, because we'll just plug them into this, to the Ryusei, whatever, Psychomu system. And it's like, I mean, sure, at the end of the day, Zeon, it wouldn't matter if it was Daryl who participated in that experiment or not. It would have just happened. Zeon would have used the technology. However, Daryl, being a very conscientious person, the realization that he was an enabler of that hit him. Besides, oh god, what was his name? The Fetty pilot in that. I don't remember. I'm trying to remember it. Ow. God, no, I can't remember the guy's name. It'll probably come to me in a moment when I'm not even thinking about it, and it just sort of like, oh, that was his name. Great, that would have been nice to know when I didn't, like, freeze up and look like an idiot because I couldn't remember the guy's name. And it's even worse because I was about to say that, like, oh, that pilot I actually liked, because sure, you're supposed to be like, oh, he's a Blood Knight, and you shouldn't be behind that because he's reveling in war. The thing is, it wasn't war, per se, that he reveled in. He reveled in taking it right to the edge. He was an adrenaline junkie, a thrill seeker, and war for him just became the ultimate way of experiencing that. And part of the story, I think, in Gundam Thunderbolt was the fact that neither of these men wanted to live life in war. They had things that they enjoyed, things that they desired. They had lives. But war twisted both of them differently. You know, Daryl became, like, possessed with this desire for revenge to an extent where he essentially made kind of a Faustian bargain to achieve it. And then the Fetty pilot, whose name, I'm sorry, still escapes me, he basically was always a thrill seeker, always, like, looking for that adrenaline high, and he just realized that war, you know, taking his life to the very edge was the ultimate way of experiencing that. And he had come to accept that. How would he live without war now? I'm gonna have to look that up because that's actually gonna, like, drive me crazy. It's gonna seem, like, super obvious to me too. It's one of those things where it's there in your brain, stored as synaptic potential, but you haven't accessed those centers in so long that there's just not enough voltage to transmit it. Which is how memory works.
Let's get out of here.
E.O. Fleming. Yeah, that's the name that kept escaping me. God. That's... Ugh. His first name is 2 letters. I couldn't remember 2 letters. That just makes me feel worse. Makes me feel old and slow. Like I care.
Mobile suit team, launch.
Ah, the Gundam ground type. Much preferred over the gym ground type. Anything's better than a gym. Honestly. Azaku... The gym was always terrible.
Is that all you got?
Ow. I mean, another thing about the Gundam ground type and the gym ground type I like, and again, it's been so long since I recorded Lila's route, I don't know if I've mentioned this, the cockpit is in the chest instead of the abdomen. And I studied a bit of engineering, and putting the actual mobile suit cockpit in the abdomen is a horrible, horrible idea. And there's a reason for that, because if the machine is going to have abdominal flexibility, which they are shown to have in the series, they have in this game for that matter, this means that you're trying to place your cockpit inside of a joint, basically, which limits the space. It means you have all this articulating, massive metal architecture around the pilot seat that's going to be making noise and going to be hilariously dangerous. Why would you not put the cockpit in the chest? It just makes so much more sense. It's going to have the heaviest armor, because that's another point. You have to temper the armor for the abdomen, because it has to move, it has to flex. It needs to be capable of that, and if you have heavy armor, that's not going to fly. Wow, Zaku won. Oh boy. You're a bit out of spec. I hear a Zaku walking. I don't see a Zaku. Oh, there we go. Why I'm fighting in the water. And beam weapons, of course, should not work in the water. There's a reason amphibious mobile suits use torpedoes or harpoons. That was an interesting part of Bandit Flower for Gundam Thunderbolt. The second, OVA compilation, or however they structured that, where he's sinking in the Gundam Atlas, and he literally uses his beam sabers as ad hoc thrusters, because that is the effect a beam saber would have if you tried activating it while you're submerged. Hell, they even did that in, Double O, because when they had that whole amphibious thing where they were being attacked by... I'm not sure if it was the first or the second time they were being attacked by a submarine. But in order to use the rifle, they had to get a point-blank range, basically, so that the energy couldn't disperse into the seawater. So we don't technically have to do that, but it gives us the ground combat Gundam, which I'm going to use, because we have equipment options. Now, why aren't all these options shown on the gym? Because the bazooka, I think, is... There were different models, and I don't mean in terms of the series, I mean in terms of the toys. There was, a high grade that had the cannon in the backpack, and there was a master grade that had the bazooka in the backpack. In the series, they show the missile launcher coming out of the backpack. I don't remember what else they stored in there, because it's been that long. I think I missed an episode or two in any case. But I like to snipe, so I'm packing the 180mm cannon. Because it's not quite a sniper rifle, but it does the job.
Not bad, they're reacting quickly.
I mean, you get lots of little details that were not thought of in the design of the original Gundam, because of when it was created. You've got spare magazines that attach directly to the side skirts of the Gundam ground type and its gym counterpart. Beam saber storage is in the calf. That's not really a structural thing. It's not more or less efficient to have it there. It's definitely more evocative of a military machine, the kind of knife in your boot. as opposed to having sort of a weird ninja thing on your backpack. And then the fact that it has a multi-purpose launcher in its chest that can fire smoke or flares or stuff like that. The fact that it has the chest-mounted cockpit, the fact that it has a mounting bracket for a backpack for gear so that it can keep its critical, sensitive weapons protected in an actual shell instead of the Gundam, which would have to have its bazooka basically attached to its backside. And you'd also have the Bullwinkle problem. Because if you had the RX-78 with its bazooka stored on its back skirt, walking through a wood or a city, it's basically just going to keep slamming that bazooka into buildings and damaging the bazooka, and it's going to be all kinds of problems. And of course, you have a reduction of gimmicks in the Gundam ground type. There's no crouch pocket for a re-entry thing, or splitting the mobile suit in two, or having the cockpit in a fighter. I mean, it's entertaining as a gimmick, but again, I have a penchant for realism. I like Botomes, I like the exoframes from Obsolete, the metal fakes and the tactical armors from Gasaraki. Even if the series itself was a bit all over the place, because it went through like 4 different writers and they all had a different idea of what they should do with it. Not good for the health of a series. I mean, it sort of forgot it was a mecha anime at one point. It turned into like weird some cross between, oh god, what was that film? Ninja Scroll. It turned into like a weird cross between Ninja Scroll and Inuyasha, like halfway through the season. We're suddenly having this period piece with giant robots in Japan and demons, and it got weird. Actually, if you haven't seen Obsolete, I would recommend it. Hell, I'll put the link for that in the description. Like, Obsolete was, I want to say it was like Namco Bandai or whatever, but it was a YouTube original series they did, and it's got an interesting premise, and the characters are interesting, and the perspective it takes is quite cerebral for what it is.
All right, let's get out of here.
I definitely recommend giving Obsolete a watch. I'm kind of disappointed that, because there are models made of that, because obviously Bandai's not going to miss an opportunity, but there's no game based on that, because it's not, to my knowledge at least, because it's not a super popular thing that everybody...
All right, lunch. Don't fall
They made
behind.
12 episodes of it, and it's a YouTube thing, and... I don't know, there's probably some enthusiast somewhere who's made a mod to some game that homages it, for all I know, or not. This is not an entirely accurate depiction of the Jim's arsenal, because its beam gun is supposed to be kind of a beam shotgun. It's only effective at close range. Here, it's just treated like a legit beam rifle.
Space aliens should go back where you came from.
In fact, the sort of crappy range of its beam arsenal and its lackluster power is why you often saw Jims in stuff like War in the Pocket or Stardust Memory as having machine guns instead. Gundam Physalis. I liked the look of Gundam Physalis. Really chunky with those huge boosters. Now, Dendrodium or Dendrobium, whatever it is, the one that I don't quite understand the notion of plugging a mobile suit into some big mobile armor to control it, because, again, it feels like a gimmicky thing, and it is. Because the hero machine in that, Zephyranthus, or, again, weird names, hard to pronounce. I just didn't like the look of it. I mean, the controller machine for the mobile armor looked pretty cool. The mobile armor, on the other hand, was a bit like... It literally looked like somebody had strapped a pair of weapon containers to a pair of boosters and just slapped a big gun on it. It looked really ad hoc, which might explain why it's controlled by an attached mobile suit. But meanwhile, the new Aziel, the Xeon mobile armor that it was fighting, looked like a thing. It had sensibility to its design. It's like you're telling me after the Federation won and had this big advantage to design these new Gundam mobile suits and so forth, and rebuild its fleet for the whole display, that Xeon has the mobile armor that actually looks like it was designed in a sensible fashion, while the Federation equivalent is this ad hoc hodgepodge POS. I land this? No, and it got me hit in exchange. Fantastic. It's interesting they decided to put the gym's beam saber storage on the left side, where it interferes with the shield, and where it's as far as possible from the main wielding hand as it could be. Gundam doesn't cross-draw its beam saber. Well... Actually, Gundam did cross-draw its beam sabers on occasion. God, I'm gonna be stuck with this thing for space combat. It sounds like a trash can when it walks. It's not particularly fast. Its attack damage is an absolute joke! In this game, the Gym 1 actually has a slight edge over the Gym 2 because its shield splits in half for the first quantity of damage it absorbs, and then in the second half breaks off, whereas the Gym 2 just has one solid shield that you lose completely when it sustains enough damage. So you're actually better off if you're better off running the 1 Year War, the original Gym, instead of the Gym 2. Well, let's be fair. Realistically, you're better off running anything other than the gym. Okay, I'm not going to use the gym because we're still in ground combat and we're going to be forced to use it for space. And I want an opportunity to use the ground combat machines. Let's see, I used the cannon last time. Let's bust out the rocket launcher.
All right, launch. Don't fall behind. Not bad, they're reacting quickly.
God, E.O. Fleming. Gotta remember that, E.O. Fleming. Crazy Blood Knight character. And well, there you go. There's another Gundam series where the main characters are not new types. Like, sure, Daryl Lorenz is using a new type technology for his mobile suit, but it's basically the precursor of the Murasame Institute and the Flanagan Institute's cyber new type research, where it's technically more cybernetic than actual, again, kind of Japanese space Jedi. Oh, I do like Amphibious mobile suit design, just because the merit of how weird it looks. Yeah. See, if something like this had come out on PC, you better believe you'd have guys modding it to have mobile suits that aren't from the era that it's depicting. There'd be high gogs, and there'd be variant Ott guys, and there'd be the goof custom, and all kinds of other weird shit. But it was a PlayStation game from back when online play was not something that was entirely common. I was asking for that. Oh, he did his sweep. Well, he did. God, I keep trying to figure out if I could only pilot one mobile suit from 00. Not necessarily among the 2 seasons or the film, but in terms of which lineage of mobile suit. Which one would it be? Because I'm sort of a natural sniper, so you would think, like, Dynamis, Dynamis, Cheridim, Zabania, I think, was the series. You'd think I'd go for that, but my complaint is that past Dynamis, a lot of the close-range capability that mobile suit had was just dumped wholesale. Like, it just lost it. Because Dynamis actually had beam sabers that they dropped with Cheridim. Cheridim was capable of parrying a beam saber attack using its beam handguns, but that seems like a bad move, man. Where's my beam saber? Where's my beam saber? And then of course Zabania. I think it was Zabania because Harut was like the transforming one in Awakening of the Trailblazer. And that one just went insane. Like, its guns are all bits, and okay, sure. I mean, in theory, I would go for the sniper machine, but that thing's just ridiculous. I mean, the close-range combat lineage got a bit of an unfair advantage because, of course, it became the basis for the 00, which was far and above better than its contemporaries because it had the dual GN drive system. None of the other ones got a chance to really let that roll. I do like Exia, though. Having 7 swords is a bit dumb, though. You've got 7 swords and 2 hands. How are you is it going to hold one in its mouth, perhaps? Is it going to attach one into a location that people will start making clashing swords jokes? Oh. Like that Big Bang skit with the lightsaber belt buckles and... oh, God. That had me in stitches, as it should. Like, oh, well, it's not going to use all of its 7 swords at once. Well, yeah, but it's a sword. What else? You have 1, and that's it. Or 2, maybe. Get a long sword, and then have a short sword. Why would you have 7 swords? I mean, and naturally, of course, the writers come up with pretty contrived explanations for how all of this works. Oh, well, 2 of its swords are like beam daggers for throwing, because you can't just vary the length of the primary beam sabers. Of course, they would end up doing that with the Exia Repair 2 anyway, because the technology had become more advanced, or something to that effect. Look at you wheeling towards the exit. Oh, come on, just explode already! Thank you! thing I equipped recover. I'm trying to avoid using it. Just purely for the bragging rights. Now, what was I talking about? Oh, I've completely lost my train of thought. It has left the station without me. I thought the whole point of having a private plane was that it doesn't leave before we arrive. Oh no, no. Honestly, that Akkai's head machine guns could screw me over right now. That's not good. Oh. Hit. Not even aiming at it. Okay, sure, fine. Oh yes, the 7 swords. So yeah, 2 of them are beam daggers for throwing, 2 of them are beam sabers for not throwing.
Get out of here.
It has the gun sword, which is technically the largest of its 3 physical swords. And of course, immediately the question becomes, why does it have physical swords if it has beam swords? Well, the physical swords can pass through G and particle barriers, and the beam swords can't. Then why does it have beam swords? Why not just have all physical swords? Well, the beam swords are more maneuverable. You know, different tool for a different job. You wouldn't use a hex driver to manipulate an Allen thing. It's like, yes, but at some point, we're just making excuses, aren't we? At some point, we're just bullshitting ourselves. And then, of course, there's the 007 swords, which was not featured in the series, and then the 7 swords G and all that stuff.
Not bad. They're reacting quickly.
The transforming designs were tastefully minimalistic in terms of the complication of the transformation, although that's not necessarily praiseworthy for the flag or the enact, because they do not look... They look flimsy and weird in mobile suit form. I mean, I kind of like it for the novelty of it, but... God, they're spindly. They're really spindly. And then the Tierian series, by comparison, look chonky. Like, too chunky. I mean, I suppose the enact and the, what was its predecessor? The Hellion are the go-between, because the flag is way spindlier than the enact, even though they share a basic design. And then the Tierians are just the tanks of the mobile suit world in the 00 universe, apparently. Yeah, oh... What was the first? Kyrios, Arios, and... Well, again, the Awakening of the Trailblazer ones kind of went weird. And they went weird hard. Harut was just a strange design. Like, I can tell what they were going for. They were kind of aping the design of the GN Archer, which is even more basic than Kyrios or Arios ever was in terms of the transformation. But you end up with something that is just... Again, it's one of those things that looks like it would only work in space, because it's got this backpack that's as big as the entire body. At least Arios and Kyrios both had beam sabers, unlike what happened with Karadim not having a beam saber, because somebody decided, well, it's the sniper mobile suit, when's it going to use it? Look, man, I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. For God's sakes, the frickin' Exia's got 7 swords, and you couldn't give Karadim a beam saber. Why? Now, Arios actually got one of the more interesting... Its heavy weapons variant wasn't all that special, especially because it involves parts forming. And you cannot deny that it involves parts forming, because in its mobile armor mode, the missile pods are attached to its arms, but in mobile suit mode, they're attached to the nose cone on the back. And there's nothing between those two parts. They're two completely separate assemblies, connected by several joints distant from one another. Now, I understand that it's probably supposed to work the way of, like, the VF-1 Valkyrie, because the legs of the Valkyrie in the canonical transformation, if you look at the artwork, they come out on these doors which swing out from under the chest, and then pegs come out from the nose cone which make the hips. And then before the chest closes up, those doors fold back in. And so basically, they're always in contact with the actual body of the machine.
Mobile suit team, launch.
But they have to be handed off from one connection to another connection. Now, the toys, of course, didn't go that way because it would be senseless for them to do that. Either just have them detach and reattach, but then the people who buy the toys complain because it's parts forming, which is, you know, bad transforming design, parts forming. The general consensus of it, bad transforming design. So instead they made a T-bar that actually connected the engines to the back of the torso, which introduced... I mean, I can understand that the toy would have to be its own thing, but okay, it's weird. And my point is that that's probably what happens with Arios, is that the missile launchers are always attached to the body, but they have to go through a transition where they are at some point attached to both the arms and the nose cone, and then they detach from the arms to free them up to do whatever they need to do. But it's just one of those things. Arios Ascalon, though, is an interesting one. Dropping the whole pincer thing, which in my mind never worked anyway, least of all in Arios. Because the one time I remember it actually using the pincer, right? The one time I remember it actually using the pincer, it was attacking a Gazzaro, one of the Innovate use machines, and immediately got beam-sabered in the main body, because of course it did, because it's point-blank with a Gazzaro in a mobile armor form, where it has no dexterity. It's fast, it's agile, it's faster, it's maneuverable, but it doesn't have direct dexterity, so there's nothing it can do in that state to counteract getting beam sliced in the cockpit, which is what happened. So yeah, it made sense to have the shield have that gimmick in Kyrios, but with Arios, it's like, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. So in Arios Ascalon, they actually made it so the nose cone and the shoulders were instead part of a GN bazooka-type blaster, sort of like what CeraV had. And it had this huge, like, GN-augmented physical blade attached to the nose cone for, like, close in, and that made a lot more sense. So Ascalon was actually a much better design. All things considered, though, I feel like my... Oh, I'd probably honestly want to operate like Virtue, CeraV, and then Raphael, because... super tanky, biggest gun, what's not to like? Sure, it's not maneuverable, but does it have to be maneuverable when it can project like a GN particle barrier? I mean, the only thing which prevents it from being OP is the fact that it has that GN particle limitation, where it can only defend itself for so long, or defend an attack in a certain measure. It can't do it continuously or endlessly. I will say Raphael made no sense. Because, okay, so you've got the little suit that's parasitizing the big suit, with CeraV and Seraphim. That made sense. I wasn't as certain about the fact that Nodley is Nodley and yet Virtue is Virtue, because Virtue is basically just Nodley with extra armor on it. So how are they distinct? It's just Nodley with armor.
Alright, let's get out of here.
I mean, that arguably made more sense. You could purge the armor, do the, again, sort of a Macross thing with the full armor package for the Valkyrie. But okay, so the small mobile suit parasitizes the main mobile suit. And then you have Raphael, which the large mobile suit parasitizes the small one, which makes as much sense as it sounds. It makes absolutely no goddamn sense whatsoever that should be the way it is, yet it is. Well, like I said, Awakening of the Trailblazer went weird with a lot of the designs, and I mean strange.
Let's attack them at once!
Gundam, please hang on.
Yes, it's this route where we get the opportunity to save Lala. Of course, I think the impression is that she ends up getting inducted into the... Oh god, I literally just used the name earlier this session. It's the something Institute. I want to say it starts with an F. Flanagan Institute, yep. I think the idea in this line is that she's captured by the Federation and inducted into the Flanagan Institute, which provides a boost for their Cybernew type development.
You fell for it. Space aliens should go back where you came from.
I've got it. I can see that.
Oh, I didn't even see that coming.
You know she wasn't meant to be a warrior. But I'm a new type as well.
But nobody cares, Char. Ow. Yeah, I gotta focus on Char because Armro's just getting shreked over here. In the Gundam. In the Gundam. I gotta do all the work in a gym. There's no exaggeration to refer to this mobile suit as a walking trash can. Like I said, even the footfalls sound like it literally sounds like those old aluminum trash bins. Kutung, kutung, kutung. Oh, that was a cornucopia of hurt. I didn't care for it. Oh my god. Oh, okay, it's going wrong. Armro's about to die, I'm about to die. Lock onto Char. Come on, kill him with the shot, kill him with the... Okay, that got a little dicey, and that's with the upgraded gym. On the cannon route. That was not cool, man. That wasn't cool at all!
Alright, let's get out of here.
What are you trying to do to me here? And that just bookends into his main route, of course. Lala Live. Oh boy, is this going to be fun, considering that he...
Mobile suit team.
How did he die in the last one? God, the AI is sometimes just beyond saving. Literally and figuratively. That statement works on both levels.
Gundam, please hang on.
You fell for it. What are you doing? Die! What?
There it is.
Space aliens should go back where you came from.
See, I want to start up in a tangent about the mecha genre and why these things don't exist in reality, and in all likelihood probably won't. At least not in the way that we would construct in our heads. But this is the last battle for Buran, and it's probably going to be the last thing, so getting started on that now, I would not have enough time to get into the detail of it. Next character route, we'll talk on that subject.
I've got it. I can see that.
Now that Char is in field, ooh, sneaky beaky you.
Lala involved, Char. You know she wasn't meant to be a warrior.
Oh, that's right, Lala's here too. Ow! Note the Xeon beams are purple now, because technically, because we're Titans, we actually have beams in the Xeon colors. It's kind of a weird thing, because the game itself only allows for 2 factions, and the beam color is determined by factions. So, because we're Titans, we're considered villain faction, and villain faction, whether it's Xeon or Titans, has orange beams, whereas the hero faction has the purple beams. And since we are villain right now, that means that technically Char is the hero faction, which gives him non-canon purple beams. I mean, I'm sure there's some stickler for extreme detail. Oh, dead to a crotch shot. Well, that's something. It's his most vulnerable area.
All right, let's get out of here.
Buran route, new type research has been accelerated. Ah, I see. Okay, so Buran has a Lila alive route. Lila doesn't. So to unlock it for Jared, we have to complete both the Buran Lila lives route and the Yazan Lila lives route, and that will unlock it for Jared. I remember now. Okay.